In Honduras, social and political movements rise to celebrate the first 2 years of President Xiomara Castro's administration. In Palestine, Israeli occupation forces committed 18 massacres in the last 24 hours, killing 174 Palestinians in Gaza. The Arab League welcomed the ICJ ruling against Israel, describing it as a victory for human values. Hello, welcome to From the South. I'm Luis Alberto Matos from the teleSUR studios in Havana, Cuba. We begin with the news. In Honduras, social and political movements rally to celebrate the first 2 years of President Xiomara Castro's administration. Citizens remember the historic triumph of President Xiomara Castro on January 27, 2022. Since her inauguration, Castro has worked on the implementation of her vision of refounding the state, oriented towards a socialist and democratic model. Hondurans highlight among the most important advances of the executive of this Central American nation the construction of hospitals, as well as the development in the rehabilitation of schools nationwide, a project that constitutes one of the priorities of the administration of the first woman president of Honduras. In this regard, citizens expressed their gratitude to Castro for the consolidation of a different Honduras with many positive changes. Let's go over some of the achievements of President Xiomara Castro since the beginning of our administration in 2022. Among these are access to sources of financing with national and international multilateral organizations, the centralization of transparency in the single state treasury, and the use of taxes paid by the population, as well as the granting of low-interest loans to agricultural sector, which generated more than 343,000 jobs. At the same time, Xiomara's government implemented an energy subsidy that benefits more than 850,000 families. On the other hand, it democratized the access to foreign currency and advanced in the recovery of the National Electric Energy Company. Castro granted the highest budget to education with funds for programs such as the school lunch. In this sense, she benefited more than 300,000 families with monetary transfers, scholarships, and bonds for the elderly. In Mexico, relatives of the 43 missing Ayotzinapa normalistas marched this Friday in the country's capital as part of an annual demonstration to demand justice and the return of their loved ones. Demonstrators demanded the appearance of the youth while carrying signs with photos of the disappeared students and shouting, "We want them alive." They also rejected the release of the 8 military personnel allegedly involved in the case and demanded the punishment of those responsible. Let's remember that in December, the Mexican government expressed that between January 4th and March 4th, 2024, it would open to the relatives all the files in possession of the Mexican state of the Ayotzinapa case. In Cuba, in honor of the 171st anniversary of the birth of the hero of the revolution, José Martí, young people will carry out the traditional March of the Torches. Youth and student organizations of the country will light the torches this Saturday to reaffirm Martí's ideology and the fidelist character of the young revolutionaries who will not let the apostle ideas die. The authorities of the nations are expected to participate in the march as a way of demonstrating their fervor and commitment, as well as the unity with the people. The first March of the Torches was held on January 27, 1953, and was led by the revolutionary leader Fidel Castro in honor of the centenary of the birth of José Martí, and symbolized an act of protest against the crimes of dictator Fulgencio Batista. Cuban Minister of Foreign Affairs Bruno Rodriguez, in his X account, said that as the centenary generation did for the first time, the Cuban youth and people will march with their torches held high, demonstrating that the ideas of José Martí have not died, and also that they will continue to defend with dignity and patriotism the legacy of the apostle. The Supreme Court of Justice of Venezuela announced on Friday the first decisions on the review of political disqualifications. The highest court of justice of Venezuela has so far informed that citizens Leo Cenis Garcia, Richard Mardo, and the former governor of the state of Zulia, Pablo Perez, have been qualified to hold public office, while the disqualification of Enrique Capriles Radonsky is maintained. The decisions of the court were announced within the framework of the Barbados Agreement, signed between the national government and the United Platform of the Opposition last October. This is the process of dialogue promoted in the city of Bridgetown in Barbados and refers to the promotion of political rights and the protection of the vital interests of the nation. In Colombia, the government of Gustavo Petro carried out a strategic territorial mission of the national drug policy in the Pacific Coast. The event took place in the Colombian municipality of Tumaco, the framework of the government with the People Public Policy strategy aimed at taking young people away from drug trafficking networks, preventing and attending to their consumption and promoting rural security and the disruption of drug trafficking structures. The Minister of Justice and Law, Nestor Osuna, said that the strategy shows the government's union for the implementation of a drug policy to create a real and sustainable change in the communities. In Colombia, the Investigation and Accusation Unit began its second intervention at the cemetery in Turbo in search of more so-called false positives. This agency, attached to the Special Peace Jurisdiction, complies with the precautionary measures ordered by the section of absence of recognition. They are deployed in view of the possible presence of bodies of victims of the conflict. The information that ordered this search came from a victim who facilitated the location of the possible graves. Previously, in a first intervention, the GEP recovered in the area 2 bodies presumed to be victims of forced disappearance, which are currently under study by Medellin Forensic Medicine. Let's take a short break, but remember you can join us on TikTok at teleSUR English, where you will find news in different formats, news updates, and much more. Other stories coming up. Stay with us. Welcome back from the south. Israeli occupation forces committed 18 massacres in the last 24 hours, killing 174 Palestinians in Gaza. According to Gaza's health ministry, the Israeli attacks also left about 310 wounded, most of them women and children. Health authorities warned that ambulances and civil defense teams are unable to reach the area shelled by the occupation, thus hindering rescue and treatment of the wounded. According to official figures, since the beginning of the Israeli aggression on October 7th, occupation troops killed 26,000 people and wounded 63,740. Palestinian authorities welcome an International Court of Justice ruling against Israel for its crimes in the occupied territories. The Executive Committee of the Organization for the Liberation of Palestine urged the world to stop the war unleashed by the Israeli regime against the Gaza Strip. They also emphasized that the ruling puts an end to a culture of impunity for Tel Aviv, reflected in decades of occupation, ethnic cleansing, persecution, and racial segregation. They regretted, however, that the court did not order an immediate ceasefire in Gaza. The president of the Palestinian National Council, Rawi Fatou, also stressed the importance of the ruling, considering that Israel is tried for the first time for its crimes. On its part, the Arab League stressed the importance of the ruling of the International Court of Justice and said such preliminary verdict represents a victory for human values and a resolution of the controversy over the flagrant violation of international law and international humanitarian law the Israeli war in Gaza represents. The Arab League warned that the emergency measures imposed by the court on Israel are binding for the occupying troops. They reiterated the need to immediately implement the verdict to the letter. Several countries have joined the United States in cutting funding to the United Nations Relief and Works Agency for Palestine refugees in the Near East after Israel alleged that there were UN employees involved in the October 7th Hamas attack on Israel. Our teleSUR correspondent Nur Harasin with details.
Several countries, including the U.S., decided to cut its funds on the UN Agency for Palestinian Refugees. And this is something actually very significant for the Palestinians here in Gaza, because the UN is actually the biggest provider, the biggest humanitarian provider for the people in Gaza, and it has hundreds of thousands of employees between teachers and doctors and nurses, and it is very much helping and providing the people here in Gaza. And these cuts comes after Israeli allegations that some of the UN employees actually took part in the 7th of October attack from Hamas on Israel. However, on the other hand, the Palestinian political faction had this long statement on social media that was published on social media saying that the UN should be investigating before firing its employees because all the Israeli allegations are lies, and this was said in the statement from the Palestinian political factions. Meanwhile, here on the ground, a new very cold storm hits Gaza with very heavy rain and wind, and the situation of the Palestinians here on the ground is unbearable. The tents are no more able to protect the people from this very cold weather. Actually, doctors are expecting that Gaza will have a number of deaths because of the cold. Noor Harazin, teleSUR, Gaza.
Gazans celebrate the ruling issued by the International Court of Justice on South Africa's claim against Israel for genocide. They also demand an immediate ceasefire in the region.
This Friday, the International Court of Justice ruled in favor of the Palestinian people, creating legal and international obligations for Israel, which consolidates the South African government's accusation regarding the provisions of the Convention on Genocide. The international body ruled that the Palestinian people in the Gaza Strip are subject to protection under the Convention.
In reality, the decision of the International Court was an expected decision. However, we had the expectation that it would order an immediate ceasefire. But I think that the pressure on each of the judges from their country had a lot to do with it. Even so, in general, we are pleased with this result for the Palestinian cause, which is like a good start in the international arena. And before the international courts, we are satisfied. It is excellent. Israel is sure that it will want to avoid complying with the decisions. It will try to create justifications to escape from the situation in which it finds itself at the moment. And it will lie saying that it did this and that. In general, it will not comply.
However, many international organizations and governments have criticized the court's failure to order Israel to immediately cease hostilities.
The decisions are not conclusive. I do not consider them firm. The decision should be the immediate cessation of hostilities and force Israel to comply with it. Also, Israel must pay for its acts according to the recognition of the International Court that Israel perpetrated massacres. But as for today's decision, I am sure that America intervened to make it a weak and fragile decision that only seeks to make the world believe that there is an international court, but in reality there is not such court, because if there was an international court and with courageous decisions, it would have ordered an immediate ceasefire in the Gaza Strip and to stop Israel to end this war. Israel will comply with insignificant matters, that is to say, marginal things, like allowing the passage of some aid, but in the main and important matters for us, like returning to our homes or stopping the war, no, Israel will not comply with them, because behind Israel there is America, and the other 53 Arab and Islamic countries, that they are countries that can do nothing. They have already met and did nothing.
Following this decision, it is expected that cessation of hostilities by Israel forces over the Palestinian territories will become effective as soon as possible.
In Yemen, citizens rally in solidarity with the Palestinian people and to reject the US and UK bombing of the north of the country. Yemenis protested this Saturday in the capital city of Sana'a in support of citizens of Gaza who are resisting the siege of the Israeli occupation forces. Demonstrators gathered in Sabine Square in the capital, the largest public space in the city, to demonstrate their rejection of the assassinations and other crimes committed by Israel in the Gaza Strip. Demonstrators also rejected the unilateral U.S. and British sanctions against Yemen, as well as their repeated bombings against the country. Yemen's Houthi authorities claimed on Friday a missile strike on a British oil tanker in the Gulf of Aden, setting the vessel on fire. The announcement was made by military spokesman Yahya Sadi.
The naval forces of the Yemeni armed forces, with the help of God, carried out an operation targeting a British oil ship Marlin Luanda in the Gulf of Aden, using a number of suitable naval missiles. The strike was direct and resulted in the burning of the vessel, thanks God. The Yemeni armed forces announced a continuation of their operation in the Red and Aryan Sea against Israeli ships or those heading to the occupied ports of Palestine until the aggression stops and food and medicine are brought to the besieged Palestinian people in the Gaza Strip.
We have a second short break coming up, but before we invite you to join our WhatsApp community for our English-speaking audience, you can scan the QR code on screen to join directly and share the link to reach more people. Constant news coverage of Latin American and Caribbean as well as the rest of the world. Stay connected and informed with teleSUR. Final short break, don't go away. Welcome back from the South. On Saturday in Baghdad, Iraq and the United States held a first round of talks on the future of U.S. and other foreign troops in the country. The Prime Minister's Foreign Affairs advisor said that the talks and whatever progress made with U.S. will determine the length of these negotiations. For Iraq's foreign ministry, the aim would eventually lead to formulating a specific and clear timeline and to begin the gradual reduction of the coalition's advisors on Iraqi soil. The talks, which have been planned for months, come at a time of heightened tensions in Iraq and the region linked to the war between Israel and Hamas, which has sparked a surge on U.S. and other coalition forces. In this context, Pentagon spokeswoman Sabrina Singh said that the Military Commission meeting will not address the withdrawal of U.S. forces in Iraq.
Let me be clear. The HMC meeting is not a negotiation about the withdrawal of U.S. forces from Iraq. The United States and the coalition are in Iraq at the invitation of the Iraqi government to fight ISIS. Our Iraqi partners have assured us of their commitment towards working together to shape this future on U.S. military presence and the enduring defeat of ISIS. The HMC will enable the transition to an enduring bilateral security partnership between the U.S. and Iraq, building on the successes of the de-ISIS campaign in partnership with the Combined Joint Task Force Operation Inherent Resolve.
In Kenya, thousands of demonstrators took to the streets of towns and cities across the country demanding answers to recent killings of a dozen women. In the capital of the country, Nairobi, under the slogan "Stop Killing Us" and "There is no justification for killing women," the anti-feminicide protesters paralyzed traffic. This demonstration became the largest event held in the country against sexual and gender-based violence. The crowd denounced that the women's parliamentary representative remains silent about the murder of at least 14 women since the beginning of the year. They also demanded that the Kenyan government should consider femicide as a national emergency. According to local media, approximately 500 women were murdered between January 2016 and December 2023. Burkina Faso received on Friday 25,000 tons of free wheat promised by President Putin as part of a package for 6 African nations. The grain had been pledged by Putin at a Russia-Africa summit in St. Petersburg last July, with Mali, the Central African Republic, Eritrea, Somalia and Zambia making up the group. Burkina Faso's Minister for Solidarity and Humanitarian Action, Nani Somo Diallo, said the wheat showed Moscow's willingness to accompany the efforts of the authorities in Ouagadougou, who face a security crisis. Russian Ambassador Alexei Saltykov said the wheat was a strong signal of the willingness of the Russian president to give dynamic impetus to cooperation with Burkina Faso, one of its strategic partners in the African continent.
Quantities of wheat were also delivered to Eritrea, Mali, the Central African Republic, Somalia, and Zimbabwe. In 2023, Mali was supplied with cereals, fuel, and fertilizer as humanitarian aid. Our country will continue to contribute not only to supplying Burkina Faso with basic necessities, but also to its self-sufficiency in food, energy, and technology through the transfer of our expertise, skills, and know-how.
On Saturday, China experienced an increase in travel demand due to the celebration of the Spring Festival, also known as the Chinese New Year, the oldest and most important traditional festivity of this culture. The country's Ministry of Transportation expects to reach 9 million passenger trips during some 40 days. According to official figures, 7.2 billion people will travel by autonomous driving, while another 800 million will travel by railroads, highways, waterways, and civil aviation. For its part, the railway operator assured that the country's railroads will handle 480 million passengers this season, with an average of 12 million trips per day, which means an increase of 37.9% compared to the previous year. According to the Foreign Ministry, the Spring Festival is joyful and peaceful, symbolizing the blessings and warmth of spring, as well as the spiritual core of Chinese culture of peace, harmony, and unity. We have come to the end of this news brief. You can find these and many other stories on our website at telesurenglish.net. And also join us on our social media on Facebook, X, Instagram, Telegram, and TikTok. For TeleSUR English, I'm Luis Alberto Matos. Thank you for watching.